Understanding the Value of PPC Marketing for Your Firm with Adam Arkfeld, episode 238. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and today I've got somebody special for you. There's a ton of marketers out there. There are. And you know what? One of the biggest things that firm owners tell me is, their gripe or when I tell them, hey, go do some LinkedIn outreach or do some marketing on Facebook. And they say, well, hold on a second. I get these messages in my LinkedIn mailbox all the time from people who are just trying to connect with me, and they all are selling marketing services. And it's a big problem in the legal industry where the good marketers are few and far between. There's just a handful of them. And there's a lot more marketing agencies out there. And whenever I get an opportunity to meet a marketer who has a specific niche that they're really good at, or works exclusively with attorneys, or brings some level of experience to the table where they have a track record and they have a message to share, I get really excited because it helps with our listeners who are listening to this show to reduce some of that overwhelm, to be able to navigate that marketing conversation with a little bit more knowledge, just a little bit smarter. So I'm super excited to be having a conversation with yet another marketer, but this one specializes in Google PPC. And I'm excited about that because I specifically have clients who they're in a high volume transactional business where PPC is the name of the game. And I'm excited to dive into that conversation to see, is PPC for everybody? And how do you navigate, budgeting for it and selecting the provider that you want to work with? And who knows where else the conversation will take us as well. So I'm going to introduce our guest in just a moment. But before I do that, let's take a moment and hear from our sponsors. Finding amazing employees is the toughest job for any business, and especially for a law firm. You deserve to be the law firm owner you've always wanted to be, but you can't get there without a great team. Get Staffed Up helps you build your all-star team by staffing your law firm with incredible full-time offshore virtual assistants. Work with Get Staffed Up to save money and your biggest resource, time, while they find you the best English-speaking VAs in the world. #delegate your way to freedom. To learn more, go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Thanks to our sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a superior virtual receptionist service for small businesses. They specialize in working with solo and small law firms. I discovered Smith AI a couple of years ago and was blown away by the range of services, which are available at a cost any attorney, even those of you in the smallest solo practice, can afford. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in English or Spanish, screen and schedule new leads, and even take payment for consults. The best part is, they don't just handle these conversations by phone. They also have live agents and chatbots capturing leads on websites and via text message. If there's one growth hack to your practice, this is it. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front lines. They'll capture new leads while you work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $210 a month for calls and $140 a month for chats. They even offer a totally free chatbot, so there's no excuse. Try Smith AI today and see for yourself why attorneys like Justin Nickel in Colorado say Smith AI receptionists are the secret to business growth and client happiness. Smith AI offers a free trial, and podcast listeners can get an extra $100 discount with promo code ProfitLaw100. That's ProfitLaw100. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Trust me when I say, don't let another day go by.
Try Smith AI.
And we're back. Our guest today is Adam Arkfeld. Now, Adam is the founder and president of Prevail Legal Marketing, a PPC agency for high growth law firms that guarantees lead costs so you can advertise without fear. Too often, marketers don't have skin in the game. At Prevail, they think marketers should share in the advertising risk and deliver predictable results using an established track record of performance. You know, that's kind of like a contingency-based law firm, where if you don't get a win for the client, you don't get paid. But if you do, you get paid nicely. So I'm curious to know exactly how that works. So we're going to jump in and we're going to find out. But without further ado, I'm going to bring Adam on the show. Adam, how are you?
Good, Moshe. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Welcome. So people always want to know who's this guy we're about to hear from for the next 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes. Not trying to scare you away from the fact that we might be here for an hour. But we don't typically go that long. But people want to know who you are. So give me the broad strokes, backstory. If you have an exciting story, like a near-death experience, then share that with us. But how did you end up serving law firms? How did you end up in marketing? Give us some of those broad strokes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I don't have any near-death experiences. So yeah, I'm trying to think about that.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. So I just did an interview last week. It hasn't, at the time that this gets released, that one will have also been released. And my guest he was talking about something and he was like, yeah, that I was in a plane crash and blah, blah, blah. And he's like that, that's a long story. We don't want to get into that today. And he moved on. And I was like, hold your horses. Wait a second. You were in a plane crash and you want me to just fly by it and we're not going to talk about it? Give me the details, please. So now I add in, hey, if you have a near-death experience, we need to know about it because those make for some really good stories. But let's hear about you, even if you never came near death.
Well, you know what I thought about when you said near-death experiences? I've done some coaching programs. We were just talking about coaching a little bit. And one of the programs I'm in, they talk about dying every day to be reborn into someone different the next day. And so the first thing I thought of was like, I've done some of these like experiences, which are real extreme and like emotionally dying or like psychologically dying. So anyways, that's for another conversation. But yeah, so I fell completely into marketing. I was in commercial real estate in 2007, market crashed. And my company, I have a computer science background. So I just started building websites with a buddy of mine. So that was 12 years ago. I have another agency, it's called Paracore. And Paracore was a digital marketing agency that built websites. As the company progressed, I realized just from a business perspective, building websites it's just not my favorite type of business to do, project-based. Like, no one ever really seems that happy after a website is launched. It's sort of like this long, laborious process, and it's like finally getting across the finish line. So we ended up switching over to paid advertising about 6 years ago and just doing exclusively PPC. So we do Google ads, but we also do about 50% of our business is Facebook ads. So Google and Facebook are huge for us. And then about a year ago, we just started seeing, and it was right around when the pandemic started, we just kind of started noticing like attorneys get kind of screwed in marketing. I mean, I won't say kind of, I'll just say they will. When it comes down to it, a lot of aspects of legal marketing are not that difficult compared to other types of marketing where it's maybe a little bit more omni-channel. A Google PPC campaign for a criminal defense attorney, bankruptcy attorney, PI attorney, once you've got good performance in a market, it's not that difficult to replicate it across other markets. And so, in my opinion, for an attorney, for a marketing company to charge 20 to 30% of a $20,000 ad spend is a little bit, the incentives are not aligned, right? Because the marketing company is just getting compensated for spending more. And that's the traditional advertising model, right? You like place media, you take a percentage of the placement. And so if it's TV or radio, that's how full service agencies work. And I can't tell you how many clients, legal, non-legal, have said, I don't understand why just because we're spending more, you're getting paid more. And if I spend twice as much, are you really doing twice as much work? And I mean, the reality is marketing companies are not doing twice as much work. I guarantee that. I know a lot of agencies, it's just behind the doors, they're not. So the model I thought was broken. So we switched the model where we guarantee lead prices and we don't take a retainer, but then we have a performance guarantee and we have to create a margin underneath that lead price in order for us to make money.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. And it's so true. What's interesting is that I've been talking on this podcast for a long time about the law firm's billable hour and how the whole model of the billable hour puts the lawyer at odds with their client. Because it's in your best interest to have the attorney do as much of the work as possible, to have the paralegal do as much of the work as possible, to not have other people on your team who you can't bill do any of the work, and to track every second that you're doing, to perhaps, I'm not saying anybody is doing this, but take longer than necessary. Like, it's not that you try to take longer, but you're not incentivized to finish quickly. The more that it drags out, the more money you make. So that whole model puts the attorney at odds with their client as far as where their interests are, and aligning their interests. And I find it very interesting that you came to the same conclusion with marketing agencies and how they work with clients. And it's not just in the legal business; it's anywhere, right? So I love the idea of tying the fee to results instead of some other indicator or metric. So how does that work exactly?
Yeah, good question. So the way that it works currently is we build campaigns just like a lot of other PPC agencies or even Facebook. There are certain types of services that can do quite well on Facebook. We do bankruptcy quite well on Facebook, whereas some other ones don't do as well. But we take a retainer up front. We are compensated ahead of time because we incur the ad spend risk. So we are paying the ad spend. And what we say is, if the price per lead, let's say, is $100, that we've established because you're in a certain market with a certain service, a certain legal service, like personal injury is obviously more expensive than bankruptcy. We'll say, hey, your lead is going to be guaranteed at $100 per lead. If you want 50 leads for the month, you pay us $5,000 at the beginning of the month. We start the advertising, we deliver the leads. And as the leads are delivered, it credits basically against that retainer. If we don't hit 50 leads by the end of the month, let's say we hit 40 leads, we'll invoice you for $4,000 to replenish back up to 50. And we'll just try and change our marketing to get closer to 50. If our advertising is not effective, so a lot of times attorneys are concerned about, hey, can this marketer perform? What's their track record? Blah, blah, blah. If we're not effective, we've guaranteed the price per lead. We will lose money. And I have lost money on campaigns that I've mispriced before. And I don't mean lost money like, oh, I'm not going to charge you a retainer. I'm losing time. I mean, I've literally stroked checks for thousands of dollars because I just mispriced the lead and our marketing was off. So clearly we try and right size that or fix it, or, there's a couple different ways you can do that. But we guarantee the price of the lead throughout a month, and then we deliver on that and we incur the ad spend.
Yeah, I really, hats off to you for dipping into this pool, right? Dipping your toe into that water and trying to navigate and figure out a model that would work. Clearly, this makes sense to do from a business perspective if you can find a way to get really good at what you're doing so that you're charging for the value that somebody's getting. They know my exposure is capped and I have results I can expect to receive. And you on your side get to figure out how can we get them the best leads at the lowest cost and increase the spread that we're making in between. So you really are motivated to get very efficient and really good at what you do. And at the same time, the client has everything going for them because they know I'm only going to spend X amount per lead. So now I have a much better idea of my potential profitability, because if I know what my conversion rate is from lead to sale to attainment of a client, and I know what my average collection from a client is, now I can tie a cost to that, and I can figure out, is this a marketing avenue that makes financial sense for me?
Yeah. And by reframing the conversation around a price per lead instead of advertising spend and retainer, what it does is it completely changes the mindset around the value of a lead. So when we're running ads and we're incurring the ad spend risk, we say, and this is important for us, if we generate a phone call for you and you don't answer the phone call, that's a lead. And some attorneys don't like that. They're like, well, why would you charge if I didn't answer the call? It's like, well, we're running ads and we generated a lead and we can't control if you answer the phone. However, when people are running retainer-based campaigns with an ad spend and a retainer on top of a marketing agency, they don't think about that calls the same way, right? They're like, oh, okay, at the end of the month, we got 20 calls. Oh yeah, I think I had 10 of them. And so what it does is it refocuses the attention on the variable that's the most important, which is the lead. And then what we find is that our attorneys really, for better or worse for us, they really start looking at each lead and the quality and when it's coming in and really trying to even solve those problems themselves. Our model is very difficult for firms that don't have strong intake or someone to take the calls or really strong follow-up process, because they see every single lead come in. We also document it in Sheets Live, and so they can very quickly determine the ROI of a campaign. Whereas I think with retainer-based models, it's fuzzier. A lead, they don't know exactly what a lead is. They're not clear in real time what their lead counts are. And we just find that the clarity is either good or bad. It exposes a gap or it allows them to see that there's good return.
Yeah, this is really mind-boggling to even think about how powerful this can be and how amazing it can be. My question to you is okay, so let's say that somebody is weak on intake or whatever, they may not be a good fit. I want to get to that because I think that's an important place to cover. But let's assume that somebody walks through the door and they're the ideal client, right? They've got a good system to answer the phone, to go from intake to to conversion, and that's not where their leaky bucket is, right? It's really on the front end that they just need to get more people coming through the door. So now they're the perfect slam dunk, hey, we should work together kind of client. Do they have any idea of what their cost per acquisition should be walking into that conversation, or is that something that you need to help them navigate? And if it is something you need to help them navigate, walk us through the process that you use to help somebody determine how much they can afford to spend on a lead and still be a healthy business from your perspective.
The way we do that is we look at, what some of our other clients have reported back to understand their, and we talk to a lot of clients, and I can sense just even in a first conversation if intake is strong or not, just by the confidence in which the attorney or marketing person talks about it. But if I'm walking into a conversation and there's a criminal, defense attorney or something like that, and I can benchmark, kind of the numbers that they're talking about with other criminal defense attorneys that we're working with. So I think, the math is very easy just from a fundamental perspective. It's okay if it's a 10% close rate and the cost per lead is $100, that's $1,000 retainer. So the math is easy. What those close rates are, I like to give some ranges based on what I've seen with other attorneys. So, criminal defense can be a little bit more tough. They don't have money. A lot of times they can do public defenders. So those close rates tend to be a little bit lower, maybe 15%. But others like bankruptcy evolves over time because people don't need to pull the trigger today. So bankruptcy might start off in the first 30 days at 15%, but might blend up to 25% over 3 months of follow-up. And so I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but that's how we have the conversation. From a management perspective of that, it's fairly simple. We throw all the leads into a sheet, phone calls and form submissions, and then they can reconcile against that sheet. Hey, contact, no contact, lead, closing. And then they know their cost per lead at all times. It's not fuzzy. It's not different this month than it was last month and the month before. It's $100 every month. And then they just do the math. And then we see, hey, you only contacted, 20% of the people that came in. Marketing is one thing, but also like the 20% contact rate is super low. So clearly there's a breakdown.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. So when somebody comes in and typically what the spend is going to be for their practice area, for the thing that they're, that they're looking for. So, I can get you leads for this cost. Obviously, their close rate is going to have a significant impact on the profitability of those leads.
Yeah.
Right. If they're closing 1 out of every 2, then their cost for acquiring a client is the cost of 2 leads. They're closing 1 out of every 5. Their cost for acquisition of a client is 5 leads. So that's going to vary firm by firm. Do you have any process that you follow in the beginning to figure out where they're at in their close rate and their close process to determine whether this is going to be a problem from the get-go? There's a follow-up question to that, but let's talk about that first. Is that something that you concern yourself with, or you kind of like leave that in their hands and you just say, look, this is what we can do?
I don't know if I'll say I have a really strong process for that yet. We have seen that issue present itself numerous times over the last year as we've been building this model. What I will say is that we have more or less, for now at least, stopped taking on clients that don't have an established intake, because the mindset around the cost of a lead is a little bit prohibitive. What I've learned is that a lot of times an individual attorney might pay a larger company, some sort of marketing company, $1,000 a month and a $500 management fee or something. Let's say they're all in for $1,500. And they're like, and the mindset is sort of like, yeah, we're getting some leads, I'm closing some business, but like, there's not a strong like cost per lead. Like when I ask them what the cost per lead is, it's often kind of fuzzy or I'm not sure. With us, it's a stream of conversation through the entire engagement. And so that becomes, so I guess that's where we typically try and qualify like who's a good fit for us. And it's not necessarily our services work for anybody, but it's more like the mindset of the attorney. How do they think about the leads, and do they actually look at them as like a value per lead, and do they look at it from the math perspective that we do, because it is all math.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on how far along in the business they are, but I think many law firms don't look at the numbers. They just kind of like get this general sense of, oh, I need X number of clients, right, in order for me to be able to pay all the bills. Because I know that in a month where I had this number of clients, things worked pretty well. So they almost are like using past experience and maybe their bank balance, bank account balance, in order to make their business decisions, which is something that we talk about here all the time. And we actually have, I don't know when this is going to release, but we have a Profit First training. We're going to be doing a 2-day workshop all around implementing the Profit First system to understand your numbers and really control your cash flow. But I think it's interesting to note, and I wonder if there's even an opportunity there. I know my friend Jordan Ostroff made that a focus of his marketing agency to get involved in the sales process. So he helps his clients build out their sales automation in Lawmatics so that they can, once the lead comes in, he's actually helping control that process so that it's becoming clients, and they're more likely to stick around, as clients. Because even though, yes, he's responsible for the leads, but if they don't do the right thing with those leads, ultimately you can show them from today till tomorrow how many leads you're bringing in. They're not going to have the revenue behind it, which means that they simply are not going to be able to continue paying that cost per acquisition because they have such a poor practice after. I'm going to detour for a second because we're tightly partnered with Smith AI. I want to just plug them here real quick. Folks, if you don't have your phone being answered every single time it rings, I want to say it's almost criminal, right? You do so much work around your website, your Google My Business listing. And if you're paying for a marketing agency or for ads, then you've got that expense and that investment that you're doing. And to then have your phone ring and not have it answered. And I don't mean, I have a receptionist at the front desk. If you have a receptionist at your front desk, you absolutely need somebody like Smith AI, because what if the receptionist is already on the phone? What if she goes to the bathroom? What if she calls in sick? Like what if it's after hours? There's so many examples I can give of when the phone might go unanswered or go to voicemail. And Cleo had this interesting thing. I'm sure you're very familiar with this because, everybody who needs to use it as a selling point knows this metric. But Cleo, in their 2019 legal trends report, I think it was 2019, maybe it was 2019. In that report, they basically did this study where they represented themselves as somebody seeking legal services, and they contacted 2,000 law firms. And of those 2,000 law firms, almost, I think it was something like 65%. So about 2/3 of the law firms either never called back from the initial contact, never answered the phone, never called back from a voicemail left, or never called back after the initial discussion, which is mind-boggling, but it highlights the fact that you don't need to worry about separating yourself from the competition. All you need to do is actually carry on a conversation until you get the client to sign, because everyone else is dropping the ball along the way. And, what that's really what's crazy about it is marketing should be a focus, but only if you have a system in place, which is easy to do. Have a system in place to make sure that phone gets answered, that conversation gets started, and that you have a follow-up sequence after that, email, phone, and make sure that you keep that person engaged all the way to them becoming a client. So real quick, if you want to check Smith AI out, go to www.smith.ai and just put in promo code ProfitLaw100, or let them know that you have promo code ProfitLaw100. That'll save you an extra $100 off. They give a free trial, but you'll also get $100 off from that. But let's go back to this conversation, because I think this is really good. If somebody has holes in that process, where do they get started? Should they be fixing that before they start focusing on marketing? Should it be something that happens simultaneously? What's your view when you meet with somebody and it becomes apparent that they're just a mess? Where do you go with somebody like that if you want to do right by them, you want to get them as a client, but that's not, you don't really focus on the post lead portion of it?
Yeah, and that post lead portion has definitely been a talking point internally. I try not to tackle too much at once because I think it dilutes everything else that I'm doing. And you are 100% right about someone answering your calls at all times. I mean, if you just think like from a very basic level, how do you shop for a service on Google? You go, you search, you click ads, or maybe you don't click ads, and then you just call or you fill out forms and then you just go to the next one. And if you're a caller, and firms do get a lot of inbound calls, then if no one answers, you're not calling that person back. They're dead to the consumer. And it's, regardless of the time of day, I've definitely spoken to attorneys where they've said, hey, I'm not going to answer my phone at night or on the weekend, and you should not. That makes a lot of sense, but they want to grow at the same time. And I think that having someone with 24-hour phone coverage not only allows you to pick up leads, but allows you to focus on the work that you're doing so that you're not distracted by clients, or like you see it come through on your caller ID and you're like, oh crap, I got to do this thing. Like it's a whole psychological game too. But anyways, back to your question. If someone doesn't seem to have strong intake, and for us, that's primarily, live phone coverage and then a follow-up sequence, we will probably just pass on the opportunity and just tell them, hey, when calls come in and they're missed, that costs us money and it costs you money, and it's not going to work. It's not going to be successful long term. So here are some companies that we recommend to get that in place if you want to grow. And honestly, I've just found that we're not an agency that takes on every single client that comes our way. There are certain practice areas we don't take on. We don't do a lot of like B2B law because of our structure. There's certain volumes that we need in order, sort of volumes, but we don't take everybody, because if it's not going to be a fit, it's just like painful for, I've had my agency for 12 years. I know what a good client agency fit looks like. It's painful for me. My team hates it. The attorney hates it. Just everybody hates it. Why do something that everybody hates, right? So
right.
Agencies are not typically very good at that. I think a lot of them are young and maybe a little too focused on the revenue, but long-term from a psychological and happiness perspective, I think it's really important for everybody involved.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you think about it, it's like here I'm putting in all this effort to make you successful, and I'm delivering everything to you and with gift wrapped with a bow on it, and you're literally taking it and throwing it in the trash, and that so how many times can you do that and still continue on? So that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. All right, so let's switch gears now and talk about in general. You had mentioned that you're doing about half Google PPC or Google Ads, and then the other half you're doing Facebook ads. So I'd like to go down both of those roads. We'll do one at a time.
Sure.
Google PPC. My understanding is that there are certain practice areas where it's highly competitive in that the leads are extremely expensive, and you need to really make a financial commitment if you want to go that route. And then there's others where perhaps it's less expensive, but maybe there's less search volume. So which attorneys, which practice areas should be considering PPC, and how do they evaluate whether it's the right fit for them, it's the right place for them to be looking for new clients?
Finding amazing employees is the toughest job for any business, and especially for a law firm. You deserve to be the law firm owner you've always wanted to be, but you can't get there without a great team. Get Staffed Up helps you build your all-star team by staffing your law firm with incredible full-time offshore virtual assistants. Work with Get Staffed Up to save money and your biggest resource, time, while they find you the best English-speaking VAs in the world. Hashtag delegate your way to freedom. To learn more, go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Thanks to our sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a superior virtual receptionist service for small businesses. They specialize in working with solo and small law firms. I discovered Smith AI a couple of years ago and was blown away by the range of services, which are available at a cost any attorney, even those of you in the smallest solo practice, can afford. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in English or Spanish, screen and schedule new leads, and even take payment for consults. The best part is, they don't just handle these conversations by phone. They also have live agents and chatbots capturing leads on websites and via text message. If there's one growth hack to your practice, this is it. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front lines. They'll capture new leads while you work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $210 a month for calls and $140 a month for chats. They even offer a totally free chatbot, so there's no excuse. Try Smith AI today and see for yourself why attorneys like Justy Nickel in Colorado say Smith AI receptionists are the secret to business growth and client happiness. Smith AI offers a free trial, and podcast listeners can get an extra $100 discount with promo code ProfitLaw100. That's ProfitLaw100. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Trust me when I say, don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI.
I think the evaluation process is the math conversation that we've talked about, and everything backs into the retainers. So, if someone's talking to marketing companies, talking to PPC agencies, and they're like, "Hey, tell me about your services," it's like, okay, well, what's a cost per click look like? Oh, it's $20 for bankruptcy. Okay, like what's a landing page convert at? Well, they might convert it like 10% for easy math. Okay, that's a $200 lead. Well, it's higher intent, so I might close like 1 in 5 of those. Like that's a $1,000 lead for bankruptcy, or $1,000 case for bankruptcy, which is pretty high. Like most bankruptcy attorneys are, charging $600. So then it's just like, all right, what are those variables like need to be changed in order to improve that result? So you could bring down the cost per click. Let's say you bring it down to $15, then it shaves off 25%. Then you increase your close rates to 15%. So as far as evaluation goes, like those are the types of questions that I would ask, which is the marketing company, what's the cost per click? What's the landing page conversion rate? What's the cost per lead? And this is what I think my close rate is going to be. Those 4 things: click, conversion rate, cost per lead, and then close rate. Because those outline the entire funnel. If you create a very basic spreadsheet with just those 4 metrics, you can basically see where your breakdown is and just kind of try and talk to other attorneys and find out their industry norms, and then as far as practice areas that I like on Google, I really like divorce, because divorce is super high intent. A lot of times cases are between 5 and 10,000. Someone looking for a divorce attorney is probably going to get divorced. And it's just a really, and then we can see leads, like right now, for example, we price divorce at $175. And that's but it's a high intent lead. And we find people typically closing cases for maybe around like 1,000 or something. And they might be making $5,000 or more on the case. And so those economics work out really well. We're seeing criminal defense do really well. But stuff like personal injury, it's like, man, there's a lot of money in that game. And we don't even play in that space on this model because there's just so much risk in it, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. Are there any practice areas that just don't do well on Google pay-per-click? I know you said personal injury is something you don't play with, but what about something where it's not consumer purchasing? So for example, if you're like a business attorney, or you do something like maybe trademarks is consumer facing, but maybe you do something more mergers and acquisitions, things like that, where typically you would think that those attorneys are going to be coming through, much more likely coming through referrals, handshakes, stuff like that. Somebody's not sitting on Google searching for an attorney for that, or at least you would think, for that particular solution. Is it safe to say that most likely you want to have your target client be a consumer if they're going to be searching on Google for the solution?
In my other agency, Paracore, we do B2B marketing there. And the way that I look at it is I look at it as the higher the ticket price, like the harder it is to advertise on Google. And that's sort of an off the cuff, like really broad stroke. But yeah, I mean, mergers and acquisitions, business law, trademarks, that is really B2B in my opinion. I mean, there are consumers out there that are filing trademarks, but not as much. Those are they're really big hits. So they're like high risk, high reward. So you might be spending, mergers and acquisitions, you could be spending a ton of money every month, but you're not really getting the right client fit. And then all of a sudden it hits and they make $300,000 on it or something. Right. So B2B is more relationship based. We don't do a lot of B2B marketing for attorneys at all. I actually don't think we do any right now. And I tend to shy away from it because of those reasons. And the search volume is a lot lower too. I mean, if you're spending $50,000 in ads on criminal defense, you can make changes and see those changes occur on a weekly basis and really optimize a campaign, and the client can see changes and everyone can there's momentum and energy behind it. If there's not a lot of search volume, because mergers and acquisitions, there's just not compared to other consumer products, it's kind of a longer road. It's a more sophisticated type of marketing too.
Now, what about an attorney that works in a market where it's just a smaller market? So, where divorce is a perfect place for you to play for Google PPC, but what if they're serving a rural community, is not that many people living there, or for whatever reason, search volume is not where you would think it needs to be for them to get enough clients through it. Is that something that you look at in your initial evaluation process? And what do you advise people where you think that search volume might be too low for them to actually see results?
Yeah, that's a great question. Low search volume is low search volume. You're in a small market, there's not a lot of people searching. That's just the fundamental economics of that marketing campaign. What we've actually found over the last year is we've had a couple of clients that are in low volume service areas. And our model has worked surprisingly well for them because most marketers don't really want to touch a campaign for less than $1,000 a month in management because of the amount of time they put in. And then, then the attorney has to spend $2,000 or $3,000. But if it's a low volume market, that's cost prohibitive. So for us, if we're tackling a low volume market, let's say we're generating 10 leads at $150 a lead, we're making a margin on that. We are not spending an incredible amount of time optimizing that campaign because we can't. But at the same time, the attorney is getting 10 leads and we're not making $1,000 on that campaign. We're just not. That's not how our margins work. So, but at the same time, we've set up a campaign that works and flows, and we can kind of like let it be. And I will acknowledge to the client, we are not spending a bunch of time on this campaign, but it's performing for you and it's performing for us. And it's a low volume campaign. And if you're happy, we're happy, and let's rock and roll. We're not going to spend a ton of time optimizing because we can't make any money doing that.
Right.
So it actually does work for really small attorneys in low volume markets because the lower economics tend to work really well. But again, then you run into that kind of conversation around their intake and that. But that aside, the marketing economics work out really well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads me to another question. Is there a client that's too small, or if they're willing to invest in PPC, your model will allow you to work with them regardless of whatever they're willing to invest on or, spend?
Yeah, we typically have a 30 lead minimum commitment just to kind of ensure that there's a level of commitment on both sides. And then if it's in a low volume market, that might be delivered over 2 months instead of a month. But I have a gentleman right now that does a very specific type of immigration, and he buys $50 leads, 25 leads at a time. I think it takes me a month to deliver those leads. We don't really mess with the campaign, but it's performing. And he's investing, whatever that is, $1,250 a month. We make a margin on it. He's making really good. He makes incredible money on that. Something like 10 to 1. It's wild because it's very niche, and it just works. And that's been a really cool byproduct of the structure, because I don't feel compelled to spend 10 hours on his campaign because I can't, nor can any other marketer. They just would not do that.
And if he's seeing results, why does he doesn't care how much time you're spending on it?
Yeah. Don't mess with it. Yeah, exactly. And that's where the performance lies, right?
Right.
We can have, a decent return on the amount of time we're investing, which is not a lot of time and not an incredibly high dollar amount return. And he has a good return on the amount of money he's investing. And so our incentives are aligned. We both won. If I had to charge him $1,000 a month, in this case, he would probably still have a good return, but it's just a different thing.
Now, let's switch gears to Facebook for a moment. So Facebook is different. And I'm not telling you anything new, but for our listeners, Facebook marketing, Facebook advertising is interruption-based marketing. It's not the consumer. You had said before that they show intent. So when somebody's searching on Google, they're showing intent for a need for your service. So that's why Google pay-per-click, it's more expensive, but it's also more direct. And that you're solving a problem that somebody has. On Facebook, you basically need to just put out there, hoping that you're casting a net and hoping that you're getting in front of eyeballs that will resonate with whatever it is that you're sharing. So what I want to ask you is, are you handling all of the design of the Facebook campaign structure? What is the attorney's involvement in, and how far back in the client journey are you looking when you start that Facebook campaign? Is it just kind of like running TV spots, but on Facebook, or is it much more intentional with specific content that when somebody engages with that, they then get retargeted with something else? Like how do you handle the Facebook side of it? Because it's a totally different animal than Google pay-per-click.
Yeah, totally different game, 100%. In all of our campaigns, our clients don't really have to do anything. They do approve the ads, and we do build a landing page specifically for them. So there are tons of lead gen companies that run leads off of third-party lead generation brands, and then they sell the leads to attorneys. Our model in some ways reflects that with guaranteeing a price per lead, but really we're a PPC agency. We build a landing page that's branded for the attorney. And then, so it means that the lead is clearly exclusive to them. And there's some sort of association between the conversion and then the follow-up and outreach. So on Facebook, and this is just, I'm just going to tell you what's worked best for us. So if anybody out there is running Facebook ads, this is what works best. This is what we've seen work best. You have to run it to a practice area that is not time sensitive to a large degree. So bankruptcy, divorce, those types of practice areas. If it's something like very time sensitive, like criminal defense, it doesn't really work, right? Because you don't know like when to time it. A lot of people do personal injury on Facebook, but even then, probably YouTube is a better channel for that. And on these campaigns that are more not time sensitive, you run to a landing page, and then we use a quiz on the landing page. And the biggest mistake that people running Facebook ads make is they run ads to a landing page with a form that says, put in your information and hit convert. And like, nobody wants to do that. This is just, I will tell you here, if you change your landing page to a quiz-based landing page, your conversion rates will probably go up 50%. And you ask the exact same questions. You actually ask more questions because you say, are you considering bankruptcy? Yes. How much debt, roughly how much debt are you in this amount? Are you employed? No. Great, you qualify for a bankruptcy consultation, enter your name, phone number, and email. And I mean, we generate very low cost per leads with just that strategy alone. So
now what's getting them to click on the ad in the first place? Like what's the messaging around the ad? Is it just, hey, are you wondering if you're eligible for bankruptcy? Like what?
Yeah. Yeah, I think people overcomplicate marketing, like with retargeting and all this stuff. And like, it's because marketing people are out there saying that it's complicated. And it is complicated, but it's also simple. Once you find something that works, I'm just like telling your audience what works. That's what works for us. We run those campaigns. And it's just, hey, if you consider bankruptcy, lost your job due to COVID, blah, 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 whatever, right? Like hook them with something like that, wages being garnished. You gotta be careful with, your ad might get disapproved if you go into employment stuff, but then they click it and then they convert. Now, the quality of these leads is way different than a Google lead, right? So if you get a Google lead for $150 and you get a Facebook lead for 30, that's great. The cost per lead lower, but you got to follow up with that person a lot. You have to spend some serious time following up with that person. And so again, on the intake, there's not a team literally following up and calling that person almost forever for bankruptcy, because if they're considering bankruptcy today, there's a good chance they're filing bankruptcy sometime in the next year.
Right, but they might not be ready, and I mean the bankruptcy attorneys who are listening to this are going to be shaking their head. It might not be in their best interest to rush to declare bankruptcy, right? There are steps to take in between to delay the process, which I mean, sometimes you have to default for a certain amount of time before you can even be eligible. So that is a longer process. But I think it's important to understand that, these are people who did not have intent. They were not actively seeking a solution. You passively came in front of them and said, hey, I've got a solution for you. And now they're like, oh yeah, I do have that problem. But their level of urgency to getting the problem solved is probably a lot lower than the person who was searching on Google for the solution, which is why that might take longer, because yeah, you've now given them the solution, but you haven't created the urgency for them.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and bankruptcy in particular definitely falls in that category. And we hear bankruptcy attorneys all the time saying like, oh yeah, these leads from 3 months ago are converting, and it just takes that, and it can take that long for a Google lead too. But you take a bankruptcy lead and you probably add 3 months to the close time. A Facebook lead, because add 3 months because they're curious, they're wanting to know, they're clearly in financial trouble, but what does that exactly mean, and are they ready to actually pull the trigger on?
Right. So as far as your pricing structure to law firms, do you typically charge less per lead on the Facebook side?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. And we'll talk about where we're advertising. So again, we don't consider ourselves lead generators from a buying leads perspective. We consider ourselves a PPC agency that collaborates. Our clients approve the landing page, but we do reserve the right to, reject suggestions. So if someone says, I want to give away a free ebook on this page, or whatever, it's like, you can do that and it'll actually lower your cost per lead, but you're not going to close the deal because you're building an email nurture sequence. You're not building a lead gen funnel. And so I will have that conversation. Ebooks are a really common conversation that I have, and I typically suggest that they don't do it, at least in this model. Maybe we can create a separate campaign for that.
Right.
But yeah,
right. And it's a question of what are you doing? Are you building your brand and long-term followers, or are you looking for clients? Because if
Right.
you're looking for clients, then, you should be having a campaign that's very specifically trying to drive leads of people who are interested right now. Very good points that you're making. I'm very intrigued with what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I'll find also that like staying on the topic of bankruptcy, most bankruptcy companies that are of any size are running a large number of Google ads, and so I'll contact them. And they're like, well, we're already doing well on Google, and then we'll say, well, what about Facebook? And they're like, we've never been able to crack Facebook. We haven't been able to. And Facebook and bankruptcy are not exactly an easy combination because Facebook has restrictions on the special category of
Right.
credit, will shut down ad accounts, and it's a very
And you're not allowed to talk about somebody's financial situation. You're not allowed to do anything that's going to make them feel badly. So you have to be so careful with what you're saying and
yeah,
how you're couching it and what your questions you're asking. Absolutely.
it's a dicey area. And one thing we've tried to do is we are experimenting with like an automated lead follow-up system after a lead has been nurtured a bit by the law firm, and maybe they were never getting in contact with them. So we call them dead leads. Lead comes in, they call them consistently for 2 weeks. If they haven't been able to get a hold of them, they can send those leads back to us. And for a price, we run them through an automation system that auto dials the lead and auto texts them. And then we'll try and auto connect for inbound phone calls. And you need particular language in order to do that for, because they're robo dials. But you do have a period of a couple months where you can run the automation because they've opted in and they've agreed to receive the communication. And then it takes the pressure off their sales team because you're kind of in an automated fashion working on a dead lead.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. All right. So you've got me sold. Somebody who's not doing any marketing at all.
Yeah.
How do they make the decision to get started, to have a phone conversation with you, to, if they're not spending money at all on leads right now, deciding to open up their wallet and try this to see if it can actually move the needle for them on bringing new business in through the door. What's the time frame they should anticipate? What kind of cash in the bank investment should they expect to make before they start to actually see revenue come through the door?
Yeah. Yeah. So the timeline looks, when someone's interested, we have a short phone call. It's typically not that long. Our model's not that complicated, but it's a little bit different. So explain the model, kind of explain how it works. And then we have a 30 lead minimum that we want someone to commit to on a monthly basis. So again, if it's a $100 lead, that means that we're paid $3,000 upfront because we're incurring ad spend costs. The majority of that money is going to Google or Facebook, depending where we're advertising. So they sign an agreement, they make payment, and then we build the campaigns internally on either platform in their landing page, generally within 7 days. We have landing page software that we use that duplicates landing pages. We duplicate campaigns internally. And I'm not going to pretend like we're creating a custom campaign for every bankruptcy attorney we work with, nor does any other PPC agency if they're pretending they are. They're just copying and pasting campaigns too.
Of course.
So they all like to make it sound like, oh, well, your location's different. But we then build the campaigns internally, and then we start running the ads. And we usually start the ads in about 7 days if there's consistent communication back and forth. And then they start seeing leads either right away or, within a few days. We generally see Google taking 2 weeks to kind of ramp up. And I'm not sure why it takes so long to kind of ramp up a new campaign, but we usually see about 2 weeks.
So from start to finish, within 4 weeks, they should be getting leads through the door.
Yeah. From phone call, like if it's moving along in a reasonable fashion, from the initial phone call, they should be getting leads within about 4 weeks. And we don't play I often hear people say, oh, the marketing company needs a 6-month agreement because they need 3 months to optimize the campaign, and I need to spend $5,000 a month. And it's like, we don't do any of that. It's like, first of all, if they do legal marketing, they don't need 3 months to optimize the campaign. I don't know why they're saying that. But you don't need that much time. Like, you should already kind of know what works. Take the stuff that you're using that already works and apply it. But we don't do any of that. We just get it started. And even if it's a slow start the first month, again, we're not charging retainers, so they're not impacted that greatly.
Right. I mean, this is all very Very interesting, because I'm already, I mean, I'm thinking of a ton of clients that really, the biggest hesitation to moving forward with marketing is this open-ended, oh, I need to first invest $2,000 a month, and then I need to, and then on top of that we have ad spend, and then I need to hope it's going to work. And so this model of guaranteeing the leads and knowing what your cost per lead is going to be is pretty incredible. So I know I asked this question a different way, but I'm going to ask it this way as well. I can think of some clients that are working on fixing their intake process, right? And their focus right now is to increase their conversion rate of leads through the door to clients coming out the other side. And we're focusing on increasing the amount of consultations that they're setting, increasing the show up rate to consultation, and then increasing the close rate when they meet. Usually, typically, law firm owners are really good with closing clients in the meeting, right? They're very often, usually, maybe the reason is because by the time somebody's meeting with you in person or through Zoom, they already know that they want to use you. They've already investigated you to that point, and it's simply a matter of meeting you and finding out what your fees are and signing, right? So, but it's before that a lot of the the leads get lost, where you can't even get them to the consult, or once they book the consult, they actually don't show up for the consult. So do you have any metrics that you can say, hey, get your conversion rate to this percentage, or this, to this point, and then come to me, because now we can generate those leads and you can push them through your streamlined system and you're going to see results? Because you said you're not going to deal with a client who's a mess, but how do you determine that? Is there a financial or a percentage number that you look at that we can help our listeners say, hey, you've got to get your leads to convert at this rate, and then it makes sense for you to put some money behind bringing leads through the door, because you kind of know what you're going to, what your profitability is going to be. It's a much easier investment to make, or a much easier decision to make, when you know those other numbers.
Yeah, well, definitely. And you brought up a good distinction, which is, are they building the intake, or are they optimizing the intake? So building the intake is tough. It's like, they maybe don't have the person answering the phones 24/7, or they don't have anyone really following up on leads on a consistent basis. Lead form comes in and you call them one time and they don't answer. That is not, a lead follow-up process. That's not, the sales part. So there's not a percentage that I think someone needs to be at. I think it's more like, can they answer calls 24/7? And do they have someone to follow up on form submissions on a regular basis? Like, lead comes in today, I'm going to call this person, 7 times over the next 10 days. And what does that schedule look like? And I have like a way to kind of manage that and process it. The lower volume, you can typically do it on a spreadsheet. Once you get to a higher volume, you need something a little bit different. So I would say it's not so much about what the percentage is, because we can help with that. And, I mean, again, just because we are really tracking every lead and it's being identified as, this is a lead you're paying for, it's very easy to say, okay, well, of this sheet in March, you got 50 leads, let's go back to your CRM and see what your contact rate was. And then you can start building out those percentages we had talked about, cost per click, conversion rate, cost per lead, retainer, and backing that pretty easily. But I would say it's more around the idea of, do they have a structure in place that they're trying to improve, or is there nothing in place? If there's nothing in place, then they don't want to pay $100 for a missed phone call. They get real pissed about that. And I understand it. And they're like, I was in court. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I totally get that. We're just generating leads. So I can't predict when someone's going to call.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I'm just blown away. I love the model. I love the simplicity of it. I love the predictability of it. Coming from an accountant, business advisory services mindset, working with clients, it's always good to find a solution where you're not carrying all the risk. And I think that this has done a really good job of highlighting, what's possible. I love what you're doing. I love the mission. And I think there's a lot of people listening to this that are going to be like, okay, I got to figure out how quickly I can get involved with you. So, yeah, I think this has been incredible. When I sign off, we're running out of time. We're gonna wrap up this interview. When I sign off, I ask you to do two things. Number one, share with our listeners, how they can get in touch with you, take the next step with you, what's next. And number two, if you can share one piece of advice, wisdom with our listeners, could have something to do with our conversation, could have nothing to do with our conversation, what would that piece of advice be?
That's a good question. In order to get in touch, the website is growwithprevail.com. So Prevail Legal Marketing, growwithprevail.com. And then it's just adam@growwithprevail.com. Easy email address. You can email me directly. The piece of advice that I'm going to give two because they kind of lead into each other. The first one is exposing yourself to people that are doing things differently and are more successful. Every single change I've made in my business has been because, not every single one, but most have been because I've seen someone else do something differently or heard something or gotten feedback. So that's coaching programs. I'm very heavily involved in entrepreneurs organization, paying for coaches. I pay $5,000 a month for a business coach, like paying real money to hear different perspectives. And then the second thing is, I heard someone recently, and I wish I'd have known this earlier. They said there's a better business model in your business. And for me, that is pricing leads, changing the compensation agreement structure with my clients for the exact same services. Because what it does, it's the same business. We run PPC. I think we're good at it, like a lot of other companies. But just by changing the structure of how we're compensated, it changes the entire business model, the entire again, alignment with the client. We do a little bit of lead generation also where we sell leads that are run on third-party brands, primarily in timeshare cancellation. And that's a similar type of thing where it's the same marketing, we're taking a little bit more risk, but it's the same business with a different business model and a different structure, and it works out better for everybody. So,
right.
You mentioned earlier the hourly billing, that's probably going to be around for a while, but if there's a way to find a better business model in your business that, works better for everybody, I think that's really compelling. And then it's a differentiator too, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome stuff. And how do people follow up with you?
Again, just hit me up at adam@growwithprevail.com, and that's the best way to keep in touch.
Awesome. Well, folks, we'll link that up in the show notes. So we will we'll have the email address. We'll also have his website there for you to click on. And we really appreciate you being open and forthcoming with us, and really showing us the inside of what you're doing. I think it's phenomenal. I kudos to you for thinking outside the box, coming up with another solution. And definitely we're going to see if we can find ways to drive some people your way. This has been, I think it's incredible. I think it's really a way to help our law firms grow. One of the things that I think that law firms need to get good at is being able to predict the outcome, being able to predict the future. And that really takes, this ability to cap the cost, to know what your investment's going to be, and you're creating that ability for them, so that you're creating that ability for them to create more predictable growth, which is really the name of the game. So pretty incredible. Awesome. Well, folks, if this is your first episode that you're listening to at the Profit with Law podcast, I'm going to invite you to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player, because this was amazing, right? We have shows like this every week. We're here twice a week, every Tuesday, every Thursday. come check us out. Tuesday, it's yours truly. I just get behind the microphone. I share with you what's on my mind, what's on my heart at the time. And sometimes it'll be really good for you. Other times I'll probably waste your time. But on Thursdays, we have guests, and those guests always come with incredible value. Every single one of them has their own expertise and experience that they're willing and able to share with you. And I'm just excited to highlight them and to bring them in front of you. So hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time that we go live or that we share this a new episode with you. And if you thought that this was an amazing conversation, think of a friend of yours that needs this. Think of a friend of yours that needs this. Share this episode with them, because they may not know, they may not be subscribed, they may not realize that this episode came out, they may not realize it's applicable to them. Share it with them, let them get the value that you just got by listening to this episode. And with that, I'm going to say, take care. It's been a real pleasure to have you here with us. And thank you.
Thank you, Moses.
Thank you for tuning into the Profit with Law podcast. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us, as well as helping us reach more people with this valuable content. Please leave us a rating and review in your favorite podcast directory. Join us again next time when we are back with even more strategies to profit with law.